Hello everyone in my extended Qigong family and community. Today I'm making a little video with a few layers to it. We're going to do a bit of a practice in an unusual way just because that seems fun. If you're wondering why I'm sitting up here on a chair cross-legged like I would be on the floor. And I'll come back to that. I'm going to speak a little bit about the year of the snake and the year coming up, year of the horse, and how that might relate to our practice. And maybe a few other things. Um, if you've never done the five spines or haven't done it in a while, if you haven't done the kind of core tone strength stuff ever or in a while, I would recommend doing this sitting on a chair. I'd recommend doing this sitting on the floor. And I'm doing this mostly just because of camera angles and whether or not things just look weird that way. So in the five spines practice, we want to play with all elongation, or we call Bape, in the spine. So that's sequences of feeling an upward reaching, a downward anchoring, which would feel more of a stretch when we're standing. But when we're on the floor or on a chair, that's a little different. But we have that elongation poise that helps us find center in the sense of how we might rotate the spine and also how the spine anchors and really hinges in the hips, which, as obvious as that is, asks us to be very spinally aware, aligned kind of iconically in our poise. And as we tilt, we want to make sure that our whole spine is tilting inside the hips, sacrum, pelvis space. And as we maybe elongate and tilt the different sides, angles, positions, if you're, if you have a chair, you can maybe play with holding onto your weight, but at a certain point, I'm just playing with gravity here. At a certain point, though, the chair is going to, tilt, right? Which adds a fun dimension of don't land on your head and sign a waiver with yourself before doing this. So we, again, just want to feel that elongation and tilt as including the sacrum and the bones around the sacrum called the ilium and iliac crests and uh, all of the pelvis. Again, just because we want to notice what it's like to move as the spine or instead of moving that deforms the spine. And it's not that one's good or bad, it's just a distinction in the way we hold poise. What do we actually feel the thorax of the body from the pubic pelvic floor to the top of the head? So that as we move, we can actually really isolate this region. And we're not trying to disconnect, we're trying to create different kinds of connection through isolating these parts of the body so they interact very, very much like say, a left foot and a right foot instead of just feet everywhere. So as I'm asking us all to drop into the first of the five spines, which is elongate, and to just play with tilt, and you can go left and right, you can go forward, you can grab onto your chair if you're risking a chair to, see where tilting goes. We still have that rule that when you tilt, if your sit bones come up off the floor or your chair, you're now kind of moving out of the five spines practice into challenging your connective tissue in a way that isn't really about spinal pelvic integrity. It's about how far is your connective tissue able to go, excuse me, perhaps needing to go, or your intuition wanting to really just feel into and explore. And I would encourage you to trust that a bit. But when you start going outside of that rule of the sit bone staying on the floor or the chair, even if you're using the chair as an anchor, let's just share the agreement that when you go outside of the bounds of the sequence and the rule set of five spines, use that as a thing to inquire what you might want to do more with your practice standing seated on the floor. Or what you might want to bring to your next massage, acupuncture, or other kinds of appointments, so that when you're going outside of or at the bounds of how the five spines works, it's an investigation as to how to work with your tissues that might be needing some help in that way. So let's just play with the first spine, elongation and tilt. And I'm not going to be tilting too far in my own practice because I'll be talking about snakes and horses and life and stuff. But please, if you will, play with that for a minute. So when we think of our spine in the context of elongation and moving in a direction, there's just close your eyes and move the chunks of the body around. And there's also the feeling that changes when we're having our eyes open and moving in different directions with a kind of integrity, a kind of curiosity, a kind of what will happen if I, play with other spines or do other things. And the reason I'm bringing our awareness to that is that's very much what the year of this last year has been, which has been the year of the wood snake, which in a lot of I guess Chinese astrology communities is often referred to as the baby snake. And it's a wood snake. Wood is the liver, wood is spring, spring is new, spring is young, spring is a bit innocent, youthful, brash. So when we're playing with this idea of the energy of this year, 2025, the year of the wood snake, the energy of our inner snake is innocent. It doesn't have poison or a toxin or some kind of venom. It doesn't really have any kind of teeth yet to do any kind of harm. It doesn't have the kind of scales yet to be, in its perhaps grumpy self kind of closed snake energy. So in the year of the baby snake, which is one of the most potent years in the entire 60-year cycle of the 12 animals and all of that, it's considered the most powerful year in the sense of how we become and renew our sense of self in the world. And you could say the world is going through that in its own way, depending on what you see in the sense of what's happening in the world, in the sense of the news and change in politics and whatever. I mean, most people hearing this are probably in North America, so we have those experiences to relate to. So the whole world is going through this kind of rough pulling off of the casting off of the old skins, if you will, but also left new in the world as the baby snake without the thick skin, the fangs, the venom, and the look out, here comes trouble. It's more like learning to move through our spines, through our bodies, in the ways that we can. So let's add our second spines. We have elongate, we have tilt, and then we have this gentle torsion. At first, we want that torsion to be very much the pivot of the center of the center of the spine. If you're familiar with the deeper seated practices, the more Neigong practice, that's where we find the line from Bai Hui through Hui Yin, the top of the head, bottom of the perineal floor, through each of the three Dantian, depending on what we're working with, so that they're aligned. They're able to move in an aligned way. And we're wanting to find the center line of rotation. So that gives us our tilt and our sense of pivot. Now, pivot, especially if you have things to hold on to and you want to like test and squeeze and really reach, because sometimes when we're doing that practice, we can really reach in different ways. We can really splay with the body open in different ways when we start from going tilt to torsion. And I'm bringing that up, and please play with the second spine while I, lather on about snakes and things. How it is that we reach into the world, opening our body, investigating what's around us. And the context of torsion also has the context of moving with your peripheral awareness, now depending on how deep you've gotten into Qigong and Neigong. This now relates to the extraordinary meridians and opens us to a part of practice which we haven't actually really gone into in any detail yet, where we're working with what's called the greater cosmic orbit. Sorry, the English is badly chosen. So this part of us, which is very aligned, very centered, very much moving through the central axis of the body, but as perception, opening to the world around us, we have two choices. Well, Penny, but for now two as our baby snake, is as we turn and look, we're looking with new eyes and we're looking into the environment with a sense of the environment. Now, whatever environment you're in, fill in the blank environment. That's what it's going to be. It could be outside, could be your living room, maybe sometimes I do this in a sauna if I go to a public facility and try not to weird everybody out. But as we are playing with this torsion and looking, the question we're asked to play with again with our perception is what's my habitual perception to new things, to potentially dangerous things, to potentially consequential things, good or bad? So it's a part of this is just being awareness. Part of this is being connected to the environment. A big part of this, though, is what's my default setting for reaction, for response, for authenticity, for manipulation, for whatever else that we might be learning about ourselves. And if you haven't heard me say this enough times, it's the compost that grows the flowers. The beginning of all of these internal traditions start with buqie, which is healing our wounds and filling the gaps and things like that. So as uncomfortable as we might feel sometimes with respect to power, powerlessness, powerful, snake, baby snake, and all of that, it's our willingness to actually be honest with ourselves as to how we turn and look at the world. Now, you could be looking over your shoulder at your bank account, at your partner, at the partner I mean, I'm just coming out of a 2 year relationship. So as I turn and look to that person, uh, what are the response things that I expect to happen? Am I in reaction? Am I in conscious co-regulation and connection? And that's my default setting, so most of the time. But if not, why? Where does that come from? What am I running on that's conscious and unconscious? So when we're playing with our five spines, and now we're getting into this, orientation to the year that we're in, just continue playing with your second spine, elongate, tilt, torsion, but allow yourself to be self, to be centered, to be in alignment, to be in uh, open awareness and connection with your environment, and deeply curious as to what the default antennas and alarms might be. Because that's I think a good idea for all of us, and for those people who are just beginning their Neigong journey, for people who've done some of this before on your Neigong journey. We're not trying to be hypochondriacs. We're not trying to be hypervigilant. We're trying to be playfully curious about what the default settings are, what the dashboard lights that we've just become used to or used to, right? So in our baby snake becoming prepared for the next year, we're in for a bit of a kind of energetic cray, if I can say that. Really unexpected transition because next year is the fire horse. Now, you could picture a horse running around on fire, and maybe that's a good start, but the year of the fire horse is it's you could say natural corollary or yin yang to the baby snake. And that transition is going to happen over the next 3 months, give or take, because of how solar lunar calendars work. So between early November, 4th, 5th, 6th, into December 20th, 21st for the solstice, we're going to go through this gradual transition. And I'm not asking you all be students of ancient calendars, so it doesn't really have to be about that if you don't want it to be. But it is an invitation for us to get very good at inquiring about how we put our baby snake to bed. And in the sense of winter hibernation, meditation, still shedding skins, because we're not going to see another snake here for, a dozen years. So when we come into that horse year, what level of innocence, in the sense of baby snake, uh, not powerful, not dangerous, not guarded with scales, not dangerous with fangs and venom, but actually just sort of a newbie at whatever it is we might be new to, and may that be every aspect of your life most of the time. But the momentum of being in that innocence, that sort of sensitivity, perhaps unwillingness to harden, which is one of the most beautiful gifts of this year, is the unwillingness to just develop unnecessary, unconscious, reactive patterns. And what a gift that year is for us all in holding us to that if we, allow that to be a part of our experience. So as we go deep into that, into winter, into the stillness, the silence, the resources disappear so that our cultivation can't just be whatever we want it to be. And that's one of the biggest beauties of winter and inner cultivation is how can we stay uh, in the process of cultivation when we don't have a lot of, you could say, fuel or resources or compost or other things to just keep making things happen. Now we have to find the humility to just allow what little things we have the energy for, the universe has the energy for, to continue to allow happening. So let's just shift into our third spine. So we have elongation and we have tilt and we have torsion and we can move around and if you're on a chair, some way to feature yourself. You're exploring different things. But now we want to include gyration. And torso gyration has a lot to do with how you mobilize your rib cage and diaphragm. So play with that. Play with the momentum and the speed part of that, especially if you're in a chair a little carefully. But let's allow this stirring to play in the context of what I'm asking us all to experience here. And whatever direction you elongate and tilt, whatever way you choose to gyrate, allow yourself to go from the big gyration, last yawning, stretching, moving of the spine of our baby snake to coming into a smaller, gentler stirring towards the stillness, but not bounded by the hold still enjoying the kind of like, half awake, half asleep, some movements, some stillness, some movements another way, some stillness, so that that third spine becomes an invitation to the kind of eye of the hurricane experience into the how do I find center again? Oh, and again. Oh, and the other way, and again. So that our baby snake, our soon to become fire horse, can agree to share a certain, what's the word in English? Um, I guess compost, something that's underneath of the snow that still has its aliveness churning, but it's not churning dramatically, dynamically. We can't just grab it and use it like, I don't know, some refund check from someone that you can suddenly go and play with or something. And there's a real deep richness in the paucity or the poverty of winter, because then we have to have the humility to just work with what little is there and the part of our mind and heart and soul that might want all the luminosity and good things or other things or changing things to happen. It's not up to the want, it's up to what's underneath the snow churning slowly in its hibernation to decide for itself how much we can move the chi of our experience in our lives, in whatever ways we want. So I hope so far the year of the baby snake hasn't been too rough or too surprisingly sensitive, because for a lot of us who maybe don't uh, rely on some traditional wisdom from somewhere else to help guide us, if you've been wondering why this year has felt so precarious in different ways, this might be one of the ways to think about it. So as we're coming into that third spine, and we're not gyrating to stir things up, although, we all have that adolescent need to, because, limitations and boundaries. But as we continually kind of come into the eye of the hurricane, the centeredness part of the gyration, that's probably one of the most potent kinds of chi in life is returning home, returning to stillness, returning to center, returning to sensing in with what is and waiting and allowing. So ways we can do that within the practices we do with, say, the calendars and the old Chinese seasons, because there's like 64 of them every year, more or less, depending on what you want to think about. What's the chi of snow falling? What's the chi of snow landing and kind of filling up? And that's subjective to you based on your childhood, your life, whether or not you have to shovel the snow in 5 minutes or 5 hours or whatever. So the chi of snow falling can be about many things. But in the eye of the proverbial hurricane, as baby snakes begin to hibernate and go underneath of the ground again, knowing that next year is going to be clunk, 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 horses on fire, can we really learn to appreciate just like, every snowflake? One of my favorite meditations, the thing where I do in winter, is just looking outside and just choosing a snowflake that's falling and making that part of my chi chant, part of the sinking, part of the anchoring, part of the landing, part of the becoming of what's below. Because the next snowflake falls, and over time and throughout the season, that helps us imitate and become what nature is in that one way. Then there's the experience of cold. And this is where Chinese and the West gets really, uh, you know, butting heads comes to mind, or taking things off in really strange directions, or taking things literally, in the sense of literally. Cold really has to do with its context to the rest of life. So cold and warmth, expansion and contraction, liquid water, solid water, and many other things. And this is the dance with Chinese terminology. If you're new to Chinese terminology, is they're meant to be an extrapolation. There's many ways to experience the experience of cold. And it's almost a game in Chinese, especially in Taoist cultivation and literature, for you to attend to all possible frames of reference for cold contraction. Where is the warmth? Can I allow solidity to be a goodness as well in its way? Many, many, many possibilities. And in that way, we delight in Taoist practice in Chinese language at all the ways, we might reflect on one term and come home to what it is contextually meant in whatever it is that we're being asked to hear, because language. But more importantly, because these are animistic, subjective, associative languages, what we're supposed to feel like. And that's the big boundary between Chinese and English is a bunch of things that are this, that. Whereas most of Chinese and other indigenous languages, it's kind of like. So let's shift into our fourth spine for a minute. So we have elongation and tilt. We have torsion. We now have gyration, go-go dancing in a good sense. And now we want to play with this other part of our spine, which is the fourth spine. So we have elongation, we have tilt, but instead of going into torsion and gyration, we want to play with this experience of fanning the vertebrae open on one side of the spine, other side of the spine, front or back of the spine, corners of the spine, in a way that just allow us within the stability of where we are, so we're not, depending on which way we're fanning, we're not draping or collapsing yet. We're wanting to just splay the spine out. So that means we have to keep the center of our upper body somewhere between our hips in a way that allows the fanning through the spine to work. And when we're doing the fanning, when we get to a place, front, back, left, right, corners, that feels like there's something we want to explore, then we do these little micro gyrations within the vertebrae that's centered in that area that's congested or tight or stiff, which is why the five spines is, without a doubt, from a clinical and therapeutic level, the most efficient and effective way to develop pliability and open movement within the spine, what we might call flexibility. But I'm always reticent to use that word because people think flexibility is a challenge of ability, so we have to flex as far as we can just in case we want to nibble on our toes. And nothing against nibbling your toes, it's just not relevant to whole body tensegrity and pliability. It's often creating fascial striation throughout the system to force one direction of flexibility. So pliability The fourth spine really asks us to keep our centers of weight over our centers of support so we can really fan the body open, move the arms, drape the arms, stabilize the arms in a way that allows this fanning and micro gyrations to melt open parts of the body that, as we keep discovering, have just taken on a certain amount of stiffness. I can make a joke about moving everything into my truck, out of my truck, into my truck, out of my truck 3 or 4 times because of the conditions of when I was kind of meant to leave and arrive, which was like a comedy. So I'm just aware of how much yarding around of heavy boxes and things I've been doing, and the delight I'm finding, in my gradual hibernation of my baby snake spine, putting myself to a slower, deeper practice in winter, and the deliciousness of, if I can call it that, old injuries being flared out, and what a beautiful chance to work with them once again, um, which hopefully is a not so subtle way of inferring we're not on a race to be done. We're trying to be the best soil to cultivate the best movement of all the other elements through our life. So there's nowhere to go uh, except here. So the fourth spine in this conversation about snakes and horses and winter hopefully will be an opportunity for us, as I've been kind of alluding to in my personal experience, to just return to what is, what has been, what is maybe the most needed to be attended to. And also because winter is storing Qing, storing our potency of potential, um, a kind of rest time. But in our sense of infinite energy and infinite everything in whatever ways the West teaches us to just always be out there, please remember that how deeply you soften the stiffness of your life in the contraction of the cold of all the things that make the warmth of our heart feel less warm. A part of our relationship with winter is to cultivate the energy that we're going to need to launch our lives into spring. If it was even 500 years ago, 5,000 years ago, which is a blip on the scale of human history in the sense of adapting to the world, we just have forgotten that we want to build our batteries for the next season. And the next season is going to include the year of the fire horse. So if there's ever been a winter where you might want to take your vitamins and get some extra naps and build some, some strength, but slow, gradual strength, like the wise old horse before you turn once again into the inspired, passionate, mildly insane horse, in a good way, then you're melting. Your fourth spine is such an invitation to just allow all the things that have stiffened you to soften. So your Qing, the chi that's holding that Qing in a stiff way, can be freed up, come back into circulation, come back into harmony, and come back into your available adaptability, because your adaptability isn't frozen in all the different things that are held in their stiffness. So, I think there's just a couple of last things. So winter is the time when, in most of the things that I'm teaching, the shift goes from perhaps building, strength and tone and collagen, to standing more in stillness and coming into a different frame of reference around meditation, bone marrow washing, which has a lot to do with softening the stiffness into stillness, the stillness into Qing, the Qing into the fluid that we say nourishes the brain in Chinese medicine. So there's a lot of ways to meditate. You can meditate sitting cross-legged in a chair, bending in funny ways, talking about snakes and horses, if you decide to stay in state and presence, in some way. We have seated, standing, lying, and walking meditation within our lineage and within all the practices that we do. If you haven't learned those things yet, I think there's descriptions of them in the first book that I've sent out to most people. So if we sit with our final spine, our fifth spine, where we have elongation, we have tilt, we have torsion, we have gyrations, we have our fanning micro rotations and things to really open the body up. And then we want to invite ourselves to drape and completely hang body, center, side to side. You might play with that in the sense of the acrobatics of using a chair, stabilize your body as you explore deeper tissue connections very safely. And again, we're not stretching for flexibility. We're just testing our range of pliability, but also wanting to experience completely just draping, which in a way is a letting go. It's also a kind of vulnerability, which is at some point, action isn't the solution. At some point, just waiting and not being in a free state, but just being in an allowing state, an accepting state, is important. And that leads us to one of the primary aspects of meditation that, unless you're fairly immersed in Taoist practice, can be a bit confusing because there's many aspects of meditation that are simultaneous and depending on seasons and systems of practice, we might attend to one or more of them more often. So one that we are most interested in Taoist practice and enjoy draping your fifth spine while I finish this conversation up, or just hang up, choose for yourself. This kind of meditation in Taoist practice is called Tsuo Wang. And Tsuo Wang means to be sitting in the moment of forgetting or in a moment of falling into, and then the moment just before we return out of what's called oblivion. Now, in the West, words like oblivion don't really sound like, spiritual luminosity and dancing with the ancestors and all the fun stuff. So, um, and I don't want to lighten the terminology up to just satisfy preference, because really, we're talking about, Chan meditation here. So when we go deep into Neigong, we do a lot of different things with spines and breathing methods and alignments and centers and gateways. And, that's why it takes 2 or 3 years to really get the whole thing. So that we have a lot of ways to interact with our experience and our existence, just like, say, there's 24 specific seasons in one aspect of the Taoist calendar. There's a lot of different layers of interaction that we can have with our conscious attending interacting practice. At a certain point, though, in whatever, if you're learning the I Ching system, the Neigong system, if you're just beginning to learn to teach, when we come into meditation, there's usually things that we attend to, things that we do. And those things are meant to be sense-oriented interactions, gently more from like the big gyration to the small gyration, the big fanning stretches into the most subtle of releases of our stiffness, the draping of the body to, see if we can touch our toes. Why not? But also to the experience, the instinctual, relational, existential or spiritual vulnerability, allowing acceptance, and in a way, abandonment of the part of us that still feels like there's something we're supposed to do. Suo Wang is this experience of moving through, and for to speak about this scientifically, which is not speaking about something else, it's just seeing a certain truth about what we're going through. As we go from stillness states, interactive states, pleasurable states, repetitive, slightly challenging interactions, if it's breathing and moving and other things that trigger what is called hypnagogic states, half asleep, half awake, remembering what you're practicing, forgetting what you're practicing, remembering what you're practicing, and delighting in the space and ease of forgetting what you're practicing. And then, oh, what, here we I'm enlightened. I was enlightened for a minute. Everyone goes through that for 1,000 years. But coming back into the delight of the forgetting and remembering, because that's that first layer of so long. Just, oh yeah, I gapped, but in the best, most enriching kind of hypnagogic state. Now, if we practice anything that has alignments and nuances and breathings and other things, that keep us engaged in the interaction. And this is why, and you can study the neurology, the history of other cultures doing the same thing, why Taoism does what it does. This is why systems have articulate, nuanced gears and dantians and rotations and images, so that the busy, busy mind is busy, busy minding the busy, busy mind, but in embodied interaction, in sensation, in embodied presence, in wonder and woundedness at the same time. So as we fill in the cracks, we attend to the wounds, we forget, we remember. At a certain point, though, the sitting and forgetting turns into a very determined, very focused, but at the same time very sensing, very balanced masculine, feminine do, feel, do, be, do is the joke humans doing, humans being. When we get into that flow state, we enter into a whole different part of the mind. And I can speak to that esoterically in Chinese or from a functional brain imaging point of view, because truth is truth. That flow state opens us to a kind of hypnagogic state in the sense of forgetting what's happening, am I awake or asleep, in a way that's determined. And this is where awareness becomes aware of awareness and then complete awareness and then awareness of awareness, awareness that we've gapped on awareness. And I'm not going to go too weird with the English on this, but because then it'll just seem like I'm playing with words. But sitting and forgetting, moving into what we would call oblivion, isn't the abandonment of good or happiness or all of the warmth of life. It's making room for a space of time and flow state and superficially kind of floating hypnagogic states. And in Chinese, we say sheng liao shui, to move with the deepest currents of the ocean, the deepest currents. So although there is relative stillness, the movement is conscious of the frenetic top of the ocean, the mappable bigger currents, and then the stuff we don't even know how to measure. And that's the place we want to learn to reside in meditation in winter, is the below, the below, the below. Now, if you're just beginning meditation, we're just going to be beginning here with getting just below the surface of the mind, and then maybe coming into the center of the mind, and then we might go through those kind of three passes in the middle dantian, in the lower dantian. So it's the same kind of peeling back the layers um, of awareness. It just, how many years, how many decades determine what it's like, where we're at in the uh, evolution or de-evolution of your practice, depending on how tricky you want to be with words. So here we are, five spines. We have our elongation and tilt, and then second spine with some torsion, third spine some gyration, fourth spine with some fanning and micro rotations, keeping our centers not hanging off anything to make us stiff, and then draping and hanging with our stiffness for all of those reasons. And it's a great metaphor for moving into winter. And it's also an opportunity to speak about the 60-year cycle, the fact that we're in one of the most potent transition years for healing, for growth, for shedding off good and bad habits, good and bad choices. And as naturally that would be, in completely perhaps refining and redefining some aspects of ourself, of course, the next thing we're going to do is run with it like our hair is on fire. So may we all together, in whatever ways that we work together right now, uh, even if that's at a distance in time, I hope the next few months allows you to truly shed whatever it is that you need to protect yourself from, so that your baby snake can slither deep into the ground under the snow and ice and wait, because next year is going to be I don't know, probably a lot different. And may you find the center of yourself so that as you co-create that difference in your world and in your relationships, you get to do that as consciously as you can. So thanks for hanging out and having a little not stretch. And may this winter, yeah, heal all the wounds you need so you can start from scratch again.